Okay. We're alive. Okay, so this is Senate appropriations. We're continuing our review of the budget adjustment for 2024. We're committee, we're on page 69 of the language. And we're down to the Vermont Saves program, and that had to do with a requested change, and you can see salary got replaced with wages. And that was testimony that the treasurer had requested, and you can see on page 71, I don't need to repeat it, what the request was and why. So I think when we had the testimony from the treasurer's office, people felt that that was okay to understood the reason for it and supported it. So as you can see, it's to apply the enforcement to the employers, because the obligation is to at least the employer and enroll. So unless somebody wants to revisit that, I would say that that was one area that we felt the change was needed, and we supported it. Now we're down to section 80 on 71, and once again, I think that was, if they could bring the program up faster, the way the language and the dates were given, it didn't allow them that flexibility, and I think they were optimistic that they could on Vermont Saves. This is really to help create like a, you know, where you can fund kind of your own pension, but you've got the advantages of doing it as a group. So this allows, got rid of those specific dates, and it was to allow them to move forward. As you can see, so if you go to page 72, and it'll say you if the program can be launched more quickly than previously expected. So I can't imagine we would want to delay arbitrarily on the earlier implementation date if possible. Yeah. So I think we will say okay to that section. Yeah. And then section 81 is just a very quick date change. And I think it was just moving a date from, well, you can see Monday to Tuesday. So it's just dealing with a very simple date change to be in compliance with federal law. That's page 72. So, definitions here.
I'm just looking on 73 at that exclusion. I'm not sure what's being excluded from what.
I'm trying to figure that out myself. I was looking back at choices for care, and that jumped over. Sure.
No, we have concerns about this, because if you don't count obligated, which means you have made a commitment to pay, you just haven't paid the bill, you're overstating the savings. And I think we did not want to, that was something that we really wanted to take a look at. Because just because you haven't spent it, if you've got a commitment to spend it, just the money hasn't gone out the door, you're not going to say, well, we haven't spent it, we made a commitment, but we're taking it back. So obligating overstated the funding if you don't count obligated funds.
Yeah.
Because they're committed. I mean, if you've obligated them, they're not available to be used for something else until you either say you're not gonna, that need isn't there, or we're gonna change our mind. So I think we will hold that. I think that's a problem. And frankly, maybe we should the intent is to prevent funds from being obligated elsewhere.
Wow.
I don't,
But then why would we take out obligated?
it just doesn't make sense. So we can.
I mean, it seems like having the word obligated in there prevents them from being obligated elsewhere.
I think
I know. I know.
want to revert. Seems detrimental to the program.
What?
Just the language.
I don't know how this.
Detrimental to choices for children.
Well,
Well,
how this should have happened out there.
Let's go to the record.
let's,
It wasn't that.
all right, let's go down. Unless we hear differently, I think to not count obligated funds is not a good idea because it's overstating what you have available to
Yeah.
spend somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that
And also it calls into question what obligated even means.
I know.
Um,
So maybe we should just close that out.
Yeah.
And if there's something that we don't understand, we can, I'm sure,
now we-
there's been a conference. So now we're on page 73. And this is,
wait, I'm sorry. So we are agreeing with the change?
Taking obligated out?
we're gonna remove that section.
Oh,
Oh, I thought you said we were gonna close it out.
Yeah, I thought she said we were agreeing.
Well, I'm sorry, we're gonna,
We're
We're
agreeing to not, but
we're gonna take it out.
Eliminate.
It's obligated.
we are removing that
Yeah.
section.
Okay.
Because we are not,
Not going along.
yeah, all right, so originally I was gonna hold it, but I think we should close it out. And if we learn something differently or in the committee of conference, then
so close it out, meaning we're all agreed, but
That's-
it's not agreeing.
that's right.
Right,
So
Then
remove.
we're disagreeing.
Catch
Oh,
the-
we close up James said. the
All
words.
right, let me go to the next section 83
That's the one where I have the question.
about the,
What is that?
What we're excluding,
is that safe ejection sites?
could well be.
I don't know what this subchapter is.
It's,
Well, it said-
maybe it's the removal of liability from those sites.
And it says it's from the certificate of need, it could also be methadone clinics, I would think.
Yeah, so we have a question about that.
Yeah, it's better. Hold up.
Why don't we find out, was that at,
We should go from that.
where that came from, that was something was added. Ginny, is that something you could check on?
I'll check on it right here.
Okay.
It's where, if it's in 1894-35, and then there's an exclusion from that, then that we'll know what it means. Just look at that.
Well, basically, all it's doing is saying that it isn't subject to certificate of need. But,
That's pretty.
but with the approval of the Commissioner of Health,
A facility in which prescription, distribution, administration of medication for opioid disorder. Oh,
that would be
I think
methadone.
that's the hub and spoke. Right, that might be the hub and spoke issue, where when you're adding a hub. For example, in Bennington, that you don't have to go through the certificate of need. I think that's exactly what it is.
That's my impression, is
Yeah.
that you don't wanna, you wanna bring it
We
online.
wanna get it online
And not-
quickly and, yeah, it's not gonna be, there won't be a competing entity. So the CON is probably not
Necessary.
valuable.
But that, we should discuss that along with the next one. Get some testimony on that. So
Well,
that we- or-
you mean the certificate of need?
No, he's down to the next section.
Oh, the advisory committee?
Right. Oh, he cool.
All it did was increase the maximum 6 to 12 meetings.
Yeah.
It's coming to us, obviously, because, the
The money for, yeah.
Do we
It's
request this?
actually 83 that we should hear more testimony.
Well, I think,
I don't think so.
I think the chair is saying, this is certificate of need, which is an elaborate process to determine whether there's a need for the treatment. And I think, the whole hub and spoke, and considering
There's a lot of infrastructure that is probably already being put in place for this, and to have a CON when you already have a clinic and you have folks who are ready to treat.
I've heard
Steve.
also some of our clinics are filled and people are getting transported long distances
Right.
to get to a clinic.
May as well open it.
So
if it's, but is that really a clinic or is it wanting to start some other type of treatment facilities?
this has to do with going through the Green Mountain Care Board, a certificate of need like you would for a CAT scan or dialysis machine. That's what it, that's what certificate of need. So, I think,
I haven't seen those, well, Green Mountain Care Board information.
that's who administers, that's the entity that administers the certificate of need. So when hospitals want to add on or buy some fancy equipment and stuff, they have to go through an approval process because it's adding costs. And the question is that resource necessary in that particular area of the state?
You still need the approval of the commissioner without.
Right.
Yeah, so we can confirm that it's hub and spoke, and if you could do that, Ginny,
I
then
will.
we can hold out until we know. Sure. But I'm pretty sure you're right on that. Do we have an opinion about the opioid settlement advisory committee?
Yes.
Okay. And we do have a report relative to their recommendations on the spending of the settlement. Now the Able Savings Program, they deleted it. There was concern that that was something that didn't, where the VAA was not the appropriate vehicle to deal with that. I subsequently talked to Stephanie Barrett, and they have no problem with this being deleted from the VAA because they have some other estate recovery changes that they want to do as part of the big bill. And the thinking is that this would just be part of that package and would be dealt through the big bill, not the VAA. So I think we'll concur with the House on the deletion of those sections because the administration it is planning to include this with some other changes in the big bill.
This is a small policy change, but it would seem, these able accounts, it wouldn't be very much money, and these are kids that, and these are people that are.
But usually we're doing estate recoveries from long-term care, and that's what I don't understand.
Able accounts are similar to 529 plans, but they're only specifically for, some at-risk kids.
I understand, and that's what I don't understand is considering what we think these accounts are for, why they'd be subject to estate recoveries under Medicaid as a long-term care beneficiary. Yes. I didn't know we were doing estate recoveries.
The treasurer's office should weigh in.
I've already talked to the treasurer's office. They're perfectly fine with this not go in the VAA and do it as part of a package.
That's all of it.
And the person who would have to do this is Ashlyn Doyon. And she's the person that
Yeah.
is going out on leave, so.
Yeah.
And the last one. I'm gonna maybe stop right here because we're getting into, they don't take Bitcoin.
I have a question about that
Bitcoin.
section, but
Huh?
we can pick that up after.
Yeah.
That's section 87.
Yeah, that, it's on page 75. So it's 87, yeah, the title's on 70. So we'll hold that. Okay, so why don't we go back to the other, CAA?
There's another one.
No,
The
we're,
real one, the real. This is the shadow.
so Commissioner, if you, want to join us,
Which commissioner?
you go together, you move that, we're paired. We're paired. Is that okay? Yes, you're absolutely welcome to come up. Okay.
Sure.
That was very quick.
The reason, we wanted to come back and clarify, obviously, we had some discussion the other day about the, purchase of the, armory in Waterbury and the plan to use it for, emergency housing. And, there's been some concern that the impression is that we're gonna buy it, set it up and close it down by June 30th. And my understanding from subsequent, discussions is that a lot of what would happen in the need and so forth is yet to be sort of finalized. And so the concern is, why would we why would we buy something, why we would fit it up and 2 weeks later say, it's closed. So I thought it was important that the various conversations that have gone on in this building, we have some clarity in terms of the emergency housing work that you're doing as alternatives to motels. We do have the some savings, I gather, in terms of the $75 a day cap. But if you could speak a bit more, because we know that we're not gonna have permanent housing at capacity. That takes a little bit longer. And so can you give us assurances that if there's continuing need, that facility is not gonna be set up and shut down within 60 days?
Sure, Madam Chair, I'll be happy to do that. And a lot of this is also, in the BGS Commissioner's bailiwick with respect of future use. When it comes to fit up, that's also a BGS thing, but, when we were talking about fit up for the purpose of a temporary shelter, we're trying to keep that the minimal fit up. I want to be very careful about saying how long this would be used. I was in Waterbury Monday night in a crowded room, with 100 people present and 100 more online, with a lot of questions about how and why we're using this shelter, and a lot of concerns that when the state comes in and says something is temporary, they don't really mean it.
Well, our Middlesex experience, like, just, but what is driven is not having a viable alternative in place.
That's right. So we're aiming at April 1st, knowing that there's language in the BAA that's coming over to this body to potentially extend the hotel motel program for everyone who's in it right now. That's 1,667 households. The so-called June cohort from Act 81 last year, that's 627.
Oh, 680, so we dropped a little.
It's coming down. It's not gonna come down a heck of a lot more before April 1st. It was, it was about 1,300 to start. So we made progress, but not as quickly as we would have hoped. So 667 total, 627 in the cohort, another 874 households are in through adverse weather conditions.
And how many are vulnerable out of that group?
Out of the total
No, out of the 878, not the June culvert.
out of the adverse weather
Yeah.
folks. Couple of the categories, households, families with children, 162 households.
Okay.
I don't think they have the breakdown of children in adverse weather, but just the number of children overall in that 60 and 67 number is 658 children total.
But that would be out of the 162 households with kids, that's the number of children.
That's the number of children, yeah. Also in adverse weather, 298 people with disabilities. Some further breakdowns here. I'd have to come back with more, but some of the other categories are people who are pregnant, including domestic violence. There are a few other elderly, so the number of folks over the age of 65. And for the cohort, it was 60.
60,
No, I'm sorry, it was the age of 60 for the cohort. Age 60 plus in the cohort, 51 households with someone 60 plus. And I don't have the adverse weather total right in front of me. I can get that for you.
Right.
I'm sorry, I do have the adverse weather here, 52 households, 60 plus.
they're, what,
60 years or older in a hotel or motel under the adverse weather conditions. So
and that's 51 people or
51 households, so
50.
there's more people than that. Could, we use a calculation, generally speaking, of 1.6 for the households. That's the average. So if you look at a household, it has on average 1.6.
No, I was just thinking about the categories of, the vulnerable population. We did make some changes. We modified. I think the 60 was one that was done last year that we were using about the same time, last year. Obviously, the big concern, and I think it was brought up, is that even with what you've got online, there's a gap between, the number of households in the June cohort by itself relative to what you have for alternative beds to hotels. And so, what happens April 1st, and I know that there's some discussion, and obviously the House is saying April 1st may come. We want you to do everything you can. We're shelter first state, but we can't be naive that that April 1st, you're gonna have alternatives for all 620, and you probably are not gonna simply say your benefit terminates.
That's right, and whether or not April 1st is the end date for the cohort. We have people that would come out of adverse weather conditions at that same time, that potentially would move under this proposal as well. Even if that happens, we do need more shelter capacity across the state. We do need alternatives to hotels and motels. In order to kind of break the cycle of what we have there, and to unlock some other alternatives like conversion of hotels into traditional shelters through lease agreements, through having providers run them. And then further down the road, transferring those into affordable housing, which we do have a track record as a state of converting a number of hotels and motels into shelter beds and into affordable housing and supported housing over time. So it's all part of, I think, the bigger strategy of having more shelter beds, more affordable housing.
I guess Senator.
Madam Chair, thank you. So I have, to be completely honest, I've found the presentations we've gotten have a pattern of not comporting with facts that they eventually turn out. So when you were in last time, we did talk about the armory. There was no mention that I remember of it being a temporary facility that was going to stop being a shelter in July. So my first question is, did you know that when you came in? And if so, why weren't we told? And if it's changed since you came in, what produced that change?
Senator, I'd have to look back. I believe I did say 3 months, April 1st.
I don't think so.
Okay, and maybe I didn't. The funding that's in the DAA,
Well, sure, that's through
that's
this
a
fiscal year,
limitation
but
through this fiscal year.
yeah, but we know.
And there's nothing in the budget that would.
But I guess the follow-on question would be, what is the rationale? Because you've acknowledged that there's not just a delta, but a very significant delta of people, hundreds of families who won't be covered. And you have no plan to cover them, but part of your plan is to take the shelter, which is 40 to 50 beds, offline several months after it opens. I'm just wondering what's driving. I heard, and I can't say definitively, but I heard that the facility would then be used to house equipment.
I think I'd like to jump in a little
Yeah,
bit on
sure.
the financial side of the house, and then obviously Commissioner Warner.
You want to put yourself on that?
Sorry, Madam Chair, my name for the record is Jennifer Fitch. I'm the Commissioner of Department of Buildings and General Services. I worked for the state of Vermont since 2004, and I've been at BGS since 2017. So when it comes to this facility in general, actually our story starts even earlier than the timestamp we're at today. And that was over the summer, we were looking at various alternatives for a temporary justice involved youth facility while we're getting a permanent facility online. And that's how we learned about the Waterbury Armory, because we had the opportunity working with the military to understand that they would be selling that facility. And when BGS went and looked at the facility, our eyes got really big and wide. Because there are a lot of different potential uses for that building, and there's a lot of different gap areas. So different potential uses do include, temporary residential housing, whatever kind of residential housing we're talking about. I like to say AHS facilities because they're big and broad, right? And they provide services to lots of different types of populations. We also have a radio shop in Middlesex that needs to be replaced. We also have surplus properties, which is out in Waterbury, but it's in lease space, and that space no longer functions and flows for them. We would like to find them another permanent home. We also do have lots of unmet needs when it does come to storage. So there are, and I could keep going, I have a huge list of potential uses for the facility. So we want the facility, regardless of what the use is. We feel like it's a very good, valuable property for the state of Vermont to have. And all of that being said, property gains value over time. So I'm gonna buy it today, it's gonna gain value over time. And when we decide to sell it someday, it will be worth more than what it is today. When we buy it, there will be some minimal fit up that will need to be done regardless of the use. So a good example of that is a fire suppression system. We would be putting that in regardless of a temporary potential, short-term use for temporary housing for DCF. So there are some costs that will be incurred when we purchase the building and do what I call a minor fit up that we would have to do no matter what the use is. But it's still a good investment because the more that we continue to invest in that building, when we go to sell it, it will gain value. So you're not losing any money on your investment.
And that's not my question. I don't think anybody's questioning buying a facility. What we're questioning is that to us, I'll speak just for myself. To me, the primary need out of all the ones that you mentioned are the most vulnerable, with children over 65, with disabilities, that we have a delta of hundreds of those families at our wits' end for shelter space, and then having put 40 to 50 people in that building, why we would then cease to use it as a shelter in the middle of the summer, just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm wondering, there's no other plan. So then you've got 40 to 50 that you've deliberately moved in to a shelter and are now going to deliberately move out into no shelter space.
I think that
That-
the June 30th date is not as drop dead as we might have understood it to be. I think that's what is being expressed here, but I think the pro tem is asking for confirmation.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that assessment. What we have in the budget is through June 30th. When we started out, we were
In the
Very
BAA.
in the BAA.
Yeah, not the 25 budget.
That's right. In the 25 budget, you'll see $7.2 million to invest in our traditional shelter system. You'll see money for permanent supportive housing. And other things, of course, in the housing, on the housing side, from ACCD. But what I would say, when we started out, we were looking at this as April 1st. A bunch of people are going to be coming out of the cohort, a bunch of people are going to be coming out of adverse weather. How many shelter beds can we reasonably stand up, on April 1st for a period of time, in case we didn't get enough people permanently housed through the cohort? Understanding there's quite a shortfall there between the 600 plus households that are in the cohort and the potentially 200 shelter beds that we can try to set up. We're putting all options on the table. This is a great project at Winston Crowdy. We're looking at mobile shelter units for a couple of communities. We're looking at capstone emergency apartments. There are a lot of different things we're trying to put in place for April 1st to soften the blow as much as we can for people who are coming out of the cohort on April 1st.
Understood that the administration and the legislature will together hopefully be continuing to search for more space. I'm just focused on the armory and why the decision. Can you confirm that the decision has been made to have that stop being a shelter at a certain date? And if it has, how does that make sense when we would then be just by choice adding 40 or 50 families back into the unhoused?
I think it's still an open question. I'll say what's in the BAA and what our planning was early on in this process was how much can we do, and it was 3 months. Or to the end of the fiscal year. I would say we're still, if that's working well, if it's still needed, we would have to reevaluate and see if we can keep that open. Our goal is always in shelter to move people to permanent housing as quickly as possible. From 2020 on, we moved 12,000 people through the GA housing program. Our hope would be with a shelter in Waterbury in the Armory with that's run by professionals and has services connected to it, that we move a whole lot of people through there. We are still going to have a need after that. We're going to constantly have a need for additional shelter space. So I'm not I think we would need to go back to the community. Why I'm being careful is because I went to the Waterbury Select Board on Monday night and said, here's our plans for a 3-month temporary shelter. If we do change that date and maybe we bump it forward, it doesn't start on April 1st. If the legislature does something else, if we still see that there's a need, we come back to that community before we commit to anything further beyond July 1. So I think it's definitely a possibility. It's definitely an option. It's an asset to the state either way. Most importantly, we have individuals who will be staying there, whose lives are going to be affected. We wouldn't just say it's July 1, sorry, we're closing the doors and put them on the street. So there's definitely an opportunity. I think if it's working well and the need is still there to potentially go beyond July 1st. But we are looking at this as a temporary solution and not a long-term permanent shelter.
And I will let it go after this comment. I'll just say that part of the trouble that I've been having with the approach that the agency as a whole has been taking to this problem is that it seems to always want to foreground the idea that we need to end the program and it's temporary. But the truth is we're in a huge spike in this population, and that sort of wishful thinking that this is going to be temporary is not going to turn out to be true. And I will cite that a year ago, we had a testimony from DCF and AHS that they were prepared to take care of every family in that program. Obviously, your testimony today makes that turn out to be completely untrue. So all I'm saying is that I feel that AHS and DCF should be planning more toward the permanent side, semi-permanent, rather than, and this seemed like a key moment where we could say, we've got this big, beautiful new building, it's suitable for this use, and we're gonna fit it up, and we were all glad to hear that, to the tune of 40 to 50 families who are in the most vulnerable.
I think they were individuals.
They're individuals, but now to be told that, no, we're gonna make a decision based on other needs having to do with, storage or whatever, we're gonna put those families out. And I can't go along with that plan if that's the plan.
Okay, Commissioner and then Senator Starks.
All I was gonna say is that our job is to serve the programmatic needs of the agencies, departments, and branches of government that we serve, which includes the legislature and the state house. And so my commitment to Chris is that for as long as he needs that for a shelter, as long as DCF or AHS needs it, that's what it's going to be to meet that programmatic need. So it really comes down to the need of DCF.
If I may, just.
Yes, we understand your delicate position. You're in the midst of discussions with the town and you don't want to get ahead of your skis on that. And we're probably trying to force you to do that, but we just need to have some assurances that we aren't just creating another cliff at the end of June and ultimately we're reducing the numbers, but we still know that the adequacy of the capacity is less than we would desire. We're trying to make investments. That takes time. And what we can put in place temporarily during this period of time is really what we're kind of getting. We see a gap. I think the pro tem's been put in the statement of that gap. And hopefully you can keep your work up and keep closing it. And hopefully the reduction in the reimbursement downward will perhaps make some of the property owners more receptive to the purchase and conversion than historically has been the
I
case.
think we see some of that happening already.
And so, and we know that there's money to do that, but I think we're still concerned about just the number of beds relative to the household, figures that you've given us. And so, some of that is yet to be determined, but we're just really very concerned about where we are now relative to April first. And this is February first, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know how it is. Anything more, Senator Burrows, you wanna,
I'm fine.
yeah, I'll second, then Senator Stark.
Yeah, would you elaborate a little more on the number 12,000 you were talking about a minute ago? Then I have another question on the rec.
Sure, the 12,000 is the people who have, who are experiencing homelessness, who came into the GA housing program and then came back out. We have, you know, a limited amount of data on where they went.
But you
But
had
they have people who come in and
12,000
people who come out this is over 4 years of people coming in and out of the GA program, hopefully coming in and out of homelessness, but also moving into, who knows? what else.
Well, if we're down to 6,000 now.
No. We're down to
What?
680, or
680.
626, you said in the June cohort.
Yes.
So of the 680, you know, a group of children, group
Yes.
of elders, group of
There are.
people with disabilities and.
I think maybe 2/3 are people with disabilities. I think it's a number of large families are fairly small, but the
That's
largest single group are single individuals, which this
Well,
shelter would
well,
help address.
Got to my question is, are we gaining on getting these people in the homes? And if we are, great. But it seems like, you know, the numbers change and then they grow right back up and we don't seem to be gaining a whole lot of ground and yet we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, or we have. And, you know, doesn't matter what you do in life, you should get one foot ahead of the other once in a while and start gaining ground and not keep losing ground. The other issue is similar to what the President Pro Tem brought up. The other day when you were talking about, you know, the buying or retrofitting, but what I've run across in the retrofitting is that when we had a shelter hospital set up at the fairgrounds in Essex, that those partitions were all gonna be, they were saved, and now they're gonna be put up in Waterbury. And so when you were here talking about retrofitting the building, I figured we'd probably get another 500,000-600,000 into retrofitting the building.
I can speak to that.
And now I find out that, well, heck, it isn't going, and that the guard has agreed to set them up for you. Is that a true statement? or-
That is true. So I'll speak a little bit about funding for retrofitting. So most of BGS's money comes from the capital bill. And we have a line item in the capital bill called reuse contingency, planning, reuse and contingency. Reuse is meant to refit spaces based on the needs of whoever is going into a space. And so we have adequate funding to do fit up. What we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure we're meeting code requirements. So we do have to do some work on the mechanical systems, for example. We will be putting in a sprinkler system. Again, I would do that for any building that we would take over. That's just something that we do to protect the building and whatever assets are inside the building, right? And so we have funding to do that. Yes, the administration has activated the guard officially, and the plan is for the guard to, so we're gonna do portions like the sprinkler system and HVAC and those components. They're gonna come in and set up the bed structures. So bringing in the temporary walls, setting those up, those kinds of things. And so they will be assisting us in fitting up the building for that purpose.
So, see, I mean, if we knew all this when we were talking about whether we should approve it, or not approve it, it would make life a little easier for us, and so we should hear about those things and not have to go and find out.
And I apologize for that. There were a lot of people in the room that day, and I was just, to be honest, I was being very respectful of who was in the room and following where the questions were going.
But you did mention retro, and reusing some of this, so some of it, information is new to us and some is maybe clarification. And we're still dealing with that underlying concern about, what happens, whether it's June 30th or April 1st, in terms of what we have for alternatives and the extent to which we're still gonna be relying on motel rooms for, populations that simply, we are so, difficult, and the conditions or the health concerns that have to be addressed. I'm gonna keep opening up for questions in terms of, I think what would also be very helpful is to take, and give us, as of now, sort of what you have in the works in terms of what you think, because, it's hard for us to put it all together, if you want to know the truth. And, in terms of what we have for capacity, what we have under development, what the deadline, and what is the difference between the numbers that we're getting of people currently, getting emergency housing relative to, what we're gonna have online, in the next few months or into fiscal 25. Because I would assume some of the property acquisitions are gonna take more time. But
I think that's right. I mean, we're trying a lot of different options and trying to see what works. We obviously prefer to invest in more permanent solutions, but it's always a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges is having a workforce to run some of these shelters. The programs that we're trying to work with, the community providers, are all stretched very thin. But we do have to try a lot of different things. And I do think that the discussion about the $75 cap is helping more folks come to the table with us and talking about lease options and potential purchase and conversion. That's a longer term strategy. When it comes to the actual investments in permanent shelters, we've seen about 80 beds come online in the last few months, and another 100 beds in the pipeline. It's one of the things I guess I would say is it's always going to fall short. But until we kind of break this cycle of how much we're sinking into the hotels and motels, we can free up more money to spend in other places. We're spending on average about $132 a night, and it's just kind of a ridiculous amount of money to spend for the condition of some of these hotels. But we're happy that some of the hotels are coming to the table and saying $75 is fine, and we'll do that. There are others that are considering pulling out, and still others that want to look at a different model, which we would encourage. It might be one of those leases. So we have focused on the 5 communities, as I mentioned earlier. We've got the Winston Crowdy, Brattleboro. We're looking at an inn that's for sale in Bennington, but we're not sure if that timing is going to work. We had something different in central Vermont that fell through, and so we pivoted to the Armory as another option. And we're looking at these mobile shelter sites. They're on wheels. They are trailers. They are what you'd call non-congregate because they have a locked door and some privacy. And there's a 10 unit, which is a single bunk, and then there are other trailers that are 12 unit with double bunk, 6 double bunk systems, and it comes with showers, porta potties, and a common space. So we're looking at Rutland to pilot that, and if that's successful, we can have a couple more sites of those that bring on 46 beds. But as you've noted, I'll say we're looking at 200 to maybe 225 beds of additional shelter space. That's not adequate to house all the people who are coming out of the cohort. But what it does do is just provide some options to the hotel and motel program. We are a shelter first state, so we need to try to fill our shelter beds. We have to fill our shelter beds first before we go to the hotel motel program. But until we change that dynamic with the hotels, it's going to be really difficult to unlock a lot of the other longer term solutions. And I will say there's a ton of work going on outside of this. It's not just focused on the hotels and focused on the shelters, but we've got interagency kind of cooperation happening here. We've got Agency of Commerce and Community Development trying to match up new mobile home sites, new affordable housing, BHIP projects with people who are currently experiencing homelessness. And then we've got interdepartmental cooperation, Dale, DMH, Department of Corrections, Vermont Department of Health, all these folks kind of working together to match up need with potential housing units. But until we have more units, it's really hard to move people out, and until we have more workforce and willing providers to come forward, we've got a really steep challenge ahead of us.
I think that's what we're talking about, all those dynamics and,
Yeah.
and what that challenge and reality is ahead. And,
There's no end in sight. I mean, when you're doing a project, regardless of what it is, there's an end usually in sight, and it's all we keep getting is bills, asked for $1 million here, $1 million there, a couple million here. And as you know, and we all know, the millions of stuff flowing in our direction. And so the pockets aren't deep as they used to be. Spending millions and millions.
the reality is though, the June cohort is a static group. It's defined. But families come in and need emergency housing all the time. And people, domestic violence or fire or health or whatever. So what we have here, and be clear, is that we have the group that has been long-term housed under the COVID program. But then we have the reality that we have new entrants into emergency housing because of their circumstances that result in the need. And it's for a variety of reasons. Sometimes people lose their housing, rents become unaffordable. And so all those factors aren't working. It would be nice if all we had was that fixed population and we could say, well, now we're down to 625 and whatever, but that is declining, not as fast and maybe as we would like, but we can't forget that in fact, we have other families and other individuals whose circumstances are bringing them in for this benefit. So, and that happens particularly over this period of time. So and that gets us into and we're hearing it, obviously the number of motel rooms is not adequate to meet the demand. And so there are times when in fact, people just can't be served because there's just nothing available. And that was one of the concerns about the $75. Would it be good leverage or would it constrain supply? And maybe we're gonna experience both. Maybe, I don't know, Senator Ruth was wondering about it, particularly in Chittenden County. But,
Right. And it sounds like from your testimony that it is happening on both sides, that some people are coming to the table, some people are leaving, but that will exacerbate the shortage. And, back to the willful decision to take the armory out if it's fitted up and used for a few months. So I was heartened to hear your statement that as long as DCF needs that, it can be used for that. So that's good to hear.
other,
Yeah, I want to echo that message was
anything else that we haven't asked that you don't want us to ask?
Or that you should
It's a
tell
tough
us.
question, Madam Chair.
I just want to apologize if I didn't make clear that we were looking at 3 months, when I came in that last time. Maybe, you all probably think of it in terms of, this is the BAA, so it's July 1, and that there would be something more after that. I'm not used to thinking quite in those terms. But we are definitely open to use this as an option if it's, still needed.
But you still have to have probably some more discussions with the community by the sound.
We absolutely, I do. I wouldn't dare to go back in there if I didn't have, I work there every single day, so. And we gotta make sure we keep the community in the loop and have them understand what our plans are.
So,
And the $75 cap, that was added in by the House, right? That wasn't an
Yes.
administration, but was the administration involved? in
We're
setting
supportive
that?
of it, yes.
Was it something that, why, it was just a timing thing, why the governor didn't put it in?
Well, we've been talking about it for a long time, the need to negotiate, with hotels. We, did some soft negotiations over the summer. I mean, the legislature actually put that into Act 81, and also negotiate the rates down, to I think $75.
I was in the,
That was in
Act
Act
81.
81 and
yeah,
I
it's-
something.
I don't think the dollar number.
we didn't have a dollar amount,
Okay.
but we did ask you to
I
negotiate
think
more.
we'll put that in to get the rooms out of Berlin. Or you're gonna rent a room in for $75.
So the negotiations, you kind of soft negotiations, that we're not a lot of takers. We are, utilizing as many hotels as we can right now, because it's adverse weather. So the cap, we discussed the cap is something that might be helpful, in spurring those negotiations along. There's a lot more conversation happening now with some, of the hotel owners saying, no, thank you, and others saying, that's fine. And still others kind of contemplating if there's a third way.
You know, are the numbers still, where Rutland is still the very high?
Yes,
and I just wondered, was this, so what did you, the administration participate? Like, say, if we talked to the hotel, this 75 is the number we suggest, or did the House come up, do their own process of testimony and say, come up with that $75?
I think there was some back and forth. We did our own research on what kind of the right mark would be. I'm not exactly sure how 75 came about. We were in the same ballpark.
I think it was the amount they were paying pre-COVID. And the question was, should that have been inflated a bit? I think that was my
I think
recollection.
there was also some market research, but yeah, 75, I think, was the average pre-COVID.
Other questions? Andy, did you have a second?
No, that was.
Bobby, you're all set? Thank you for clarifying.
That is I'm gonna be.
All right. Thank you for this.
Tell us the whole story.
I apologize if I wasn't there the first time I was in. I'll try to be better next time.
Great. That's all. There's a
I
lot
figured-
to retain here.
And we're pretty good.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. And, we were very late starting, so, shall we try to crank through the rest of this while we're here? It's not too painful, it's more blah, but, on page, we were up to page 75. And that has to do with, virtual currency, and that was something that was requested, yes.
And I have a question,
Oh, okay.
maybe Grady can answer. So in that first paragraph, it says if property reported to the administrator is virtual, the holder shall liquidate the virtual currency and remit the proceeds to the administrator. And then it's the next sentence that I find confusing. The liquidation shall occur anytime within 30 days prior to the remittance. So the timeline is when you remit it, you have 30 days. But it doesn't say that it has to be remitted. There's no deadline to start the process, only to end it. So in other words, we find out that property was reported and it's virtual. With this language, it seems like nothing starts the process. Could be 10 years later, 100 years later. But then once you do it, you have 30 days to give it back.
Right,
So it almost seems like it should be 30 days after it's reported that it's virtual. So it's almost like the timeline is on the wrong.
We need the timeline for liquidation.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
right.
But
Does that make sense?
liquidation shall occur within 30 days.
Prior to the remittance, so prior to when you give it back.
So it says if the property is reported, so I think what we were talking about
See what I'm
is
saying?
after reporting, you have X amount of days to liquidate.
Right,
And after you liquidate, you have 30 days to
Yes.
send it in.
right.
So I think it's if the property reported, so I think within we need to have something maybe that indicates that a deadline after reporting
Yeah.
that liquidation would occur.
We can work with the treasurer's office,
That would be great.
modify the contract there.
So I understand what you're concerned about. It could be 10 years before you
Right.
get the
Yeah,
liquidation.
Nothing, no clock starts, unless you decide you're gonna remit it at some point in the future.
Or, so if you can follow up on that, thank you. Anything else?
I know.
So we'll hold that, until we got some revision, or the treasurer's office can tell us, but I think we really do want a deadline after reporting.
Maybe there's already a date for remittance.
Well, the remittance is 30 days after liquidation. I think Phil's comment is
Yeah,
there needs to be a deadline to liquidate.
Right.
right, and there might be another deadline that's.
Yeah.
That we.
Yeah, maybe. So we'll check it out. We understand the state doesn't want to hold cryptocurrency, but this is the liquidation timeline is.
It's not remitted for 10 years, given how cryptocurrency works. I think that would probably be less than a penny in the
That's what I'm saying.
It won't be much to liquidate, and there won't be much to remit. Okay.
The next section 88, this increases the survivor's benefit for EMS, line of duty deaths. And occupation related illness from 50,000 to 80,000.
It's been years since it had been changed and they felt it was just.
And is that the same for other survivors?
Where did the number come from?
Treasurers did it an inflation adjustment.
Correct.
It was just an inflation.
Yes, it's been years.
Correct. To my knowledge, a claim from this one hasn't been made in some time, and as of 2022, there was about a bit over $170,000 in the fund. So this is an inflation adjustment from the treasurer's office. They feel comfortable that there's sufficient funds in the fund to support it.
We should have had some of that in the vote.
No, not necessarily,
The insurance fund.
not a reserve fund like that. But you don't know when there's gonna be a claim against it.
It's all we pay the cost.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's for occupation related.
It's not a
death.
big bucket of money, or you've got an $80,000 death benefit.
I think it's pretty rare for emergency personnel to die line of duty, so.
Yeah, it's my understanding that the claim has not been made in some time.
Yeah, it still seems to be.
Yeah.
You lose somebody.
80,000.
Yeah, that's-
Particularly, when someone is dying and
Alignment.
line of duty,
Mhm.
it means that they're dying during their wage earning lifetime
Yeah,
and
80 grand is-
so I guess we would say that we would close that out.
Yes.
The following section is related to pension actuarial adjustments. So this is reverting to the pre-2016 way of doing the teacher COLA.
I would say, trust me on this one, close it up. We're just fulfilling our promise.
We'd like to do that.
Oh,
We'd like to do that.
well, I love that quote from the cremation of Sam McGee, "A promise made is a debt unpaid." And this is, so we made the commitment last year and we're paying it here. So that takes care of the policy change that we committed, and then And then,
The next section begins on page 80. Section 80. This amends VHFA's missing middle homeownership.
yeah, we're holding this because, we have, we've got to figure out money for housing and, so I mentioned to the community, I've given those, housing related sections to Senator Ron Hinsdale. And some of it ties back into F-100 that came out of the community last year. And, so we'll, hold these pending some feedback. The other thing with housing is we're back to the fact that the House budget adjustment spent a $29 million general fund upgrade here. And the governor used the $29 million upgrade in his FY25 budget. So we've got to crosswalk the housing and maybe some of what's in the VA, just moving forward. Some of the I'd say we're applying it all to the 29 million, how much of it we just simply are getting in the BAA rather than the big bill.
And then leave us enough to buy a pack of them.
Well,
The following section, section 91, is related to section 90, so I would assume that that will be on hold as well. And that's on page 85.
all of that, we're just,
And section 92, this is where we're unreserving what we get reserved for teachers' pensions and then appropriating the correct number, which is that 9.34 million.
that's fine.
Is it?
We reserved 9.1, we thought that was pretty close. We had a little bit left from the 3 million we appropriated last year for the one time. And so the gap was, what, 160, was it?
It was slightly more, it was 240.
240.
So there was a $3 million appropriation. There's language earlier in the bill I spoke on yesterday that references that $160,000.
Yes, but that's why it's 9.3.
The following section is the general assistance emergency housing language the Commissioner Winters was discussing with the committee.
So that is all, well, what?
That has some money.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
That's the $75.
Yeah, it
Correct.
does have the 75. This is all, I think we're just gonna have to take this up as a package.
Mhm.
This is what you're sending to.
Yeah.
Right. Housing.
Some discussion with housing as well.
Including the $75.
Well, no, I think that's probably something that we can dive. I didn't ask Keisha to weigh in on that.
Oh, I thought you meant, that we would. So I was thinking all of this was us with Keisha Burton.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So can we just, in this,
I know.
What?
I've got no problem with just to say this in, the 75 is target. But when it says in no event shall it happen,
Right.
I can't tell you what kind of an emergency the commissioner might have. And
That is very absolute language. So if you can't, if someone under, I don't know, say, with a very significant health problem or something, and you can only get a bed for $80,
Right.
this basically says you can't do it.
Yeah.
That was mine.
I just think, I think that's a little.
And it's almost a 50% reduction from where we are now.
They should have had that discussion 2 years ago when they were paying $180 or $90.
Now, that's what happened with all the federal money. And don't forget, this was put in place when we were in a pandemic that we had never experienced and people were really concerned about. People getting COVID, people, at that point were dying and we forget, what that world was like. And So, yeah, now this is the legacy of it,
We're
but,
going from one extreme to another.
maybe we can, I don't wanna, it's gonna be artful balance, because we don't wanna get, we wanna make sure that we are, negotiating and we have leverage and say, we, are not overpaying. Some of these rooms are really, they give you a roof, but they are not
Right.
obviously optimum living arrangements. And, if you've got a couple of people in a small motel room, I can't even imagine, what it's like. I get awfully sick of Gil. He would have died earlier than he did, I think, if I'd been put in a room for 2 years with just the two of us, but it's nothing to do with anything here, other than it's just stress, and if you've got family and, whatever, so. We will see if we can do something on that language, but don't want to anyway weaken the message to make sure. Because I know that they were using some of those savings to help, on the other side.
I totally agree with that. Now, I just think that absolute language is.
We talk about the motel rooms and all that. But when you really think about it, you almost should include nursing homes. And they're closing up my way, we've lost three.
Mhm.
And you talk about dying with dignity and how important it is. And they have to take all our elderly people and truck them 60 miles away from home to give them a nursing home, because ours are all frozen, because we don't pay them enough. And I mean, that's, and here we're been paying $170 or whatever.
We pay more than that for a nursing home bed though.
Well, maybe we should be. I mean, if they're all going broke and.
Well, don't forget that we gave 18 million last year in emergency relief. We rebased the year. This year, we're changing the occupancy rate. We have the BAA. The administration requested 17 million emergency relief for the very reason you're talking about. The House reduced it to 14. We're not sure the basis for the reduction because Dale didn't provide any testimony. So, and I believe that the budget in 25 builds in a lower occupancy rate for nursing homes. So there's some, but
Wow.
where nursing homes really got hit on occupancy was they couldn't find the staffing, they couldn't meet the licensing requirements.
Visiting nurses, went right through the.
So,
That's it.
so let's see, we're unobligated
Grady
funds.
has a,
I'm sorry, Grady.
I would just like to clarify for the committee, for Senator Lessman's comment regarding the in no event language. That applies to long-term lease agreements that the Agency of Human Services could enter into for a full facility lease. So that $75 in no event.
I was aware of that,
Okay.
and I only say it in respect, because we know that there are a bunch of people that are in that, particularly that 600, whatever number we're at. And that they have special needs. If they went in and said, we have this category of people that is special needs, I want the commissioner to be able to have some. And that's why I bring it up now. I don't want us to get to the last day and we're rushing to get that.
Well, I think Grady's pointing at the beginning part.
Right,
You
so,
could be paying $95 to a motel where you have no lease agreement. This is
Right.
really setting forth if you enter into a lease or a sales agreement, what the parameters are for that lease agreement. But I don't think, and we can confirm
so
that, that it would preclude if you're talking about a room in a home where you don't have a lease in place, that you could in fact do the higher amount. But we can confirm that in terms of, because it says, in no event shall an agreement. So this is conditioning the parameters of the agreement.
Right, so in sub D of this language is where you'll see the $75 day rate on page 86, line 15. So that language says beginning on March 1st, the Agency of Human Services shall not reimburse any licensed hotel or motel establishment more than $75 a day.
Yeah, so that actually picks up the ones that are not a lease. Right.
Right, so
So you've got
just
those.
clarifying for the community, there are two instances of that preventive
All right, well,
threshold language.
all right, so maybe a lease agreement isn't the issue. It's the earlier section on page 86 that we need to.
And if the other committee could just tell us where the $75 came from.
We got testimony on it. It's basically what GA was paying prior to the COVID pandemic.
Okay, that's what Adam Gresham said.
We have testimony on that, in terms of how that was arrived at.
And it's my knowledge that the House decision on that was informed by the pre-COVID rate.
I believe we heard that from Representative Lanford. She's the one who made reference to how they came to that amount. And that raised the question about, you know, that a lot of inflation has occurred since then, so.
The $75 is on per unit thing. And, you know, it isn't on a per person thing.
No.
I thought I just read this per unit.
Per room per household.
It's a household.
Shelter house.
Yeah, so it's per room.
Yes.
So you could end up getting 4 people in a room.
You could, if you had a mother with 3 children, sure. Or you could have a couple with 2 children, or you could, you know, so absolutely. So it's in both places. So we'll just have to,
I still agree that that's gonna be a rough number to me. If you're renting out the entire place, you got 10 rooms. At $75 dollars. I mean, you're gonna get $750 for the whole motel per night. Well, you know, that isn't very much money, and I know.
Well, we're gonna keep talking about,
I will give them room to negotiate, because that, in some areas.
Well, I think we need to remember we're talking about 2 different things, one of which is a lease or sales agreement. And then the other provision, which is the earlier one, is, well, yes, and maybe the 75 makes sense when you're doing a lease. I mean, that's if you're guaranteeing an amount, which is different than.
Why do you think the other one is open when it says shall not more than $75? How do you get over $75 for that language?
You don't, I was just flagging that there are 2 instances.
Of the
So
limitations
one applies
Still
to long.
shall not go over $75.
yeah, they locked down $75.
in both
correct.
cases.
Yeah.
So Weston's points is valid that it doesn't give any opportunity to go to 76.50.
On page 86.
Correct.
Either way, either page.
Well, but if you've got a lease, then you've got to create a part of that lease is what if you've already negotiated that rate. Because it does allow you to enter an agreement.
And
I wanted to flag for the committee that the second instance of the 75, that would not lead to a situation where on a cold night, a hotel is available for $80 and that would be a lease agreement. So the $75 cap wouldn't necessarily lead to a need not being met because of an emergency situation.
Right, so yeah, but it can't go over $75 either way, whether it's a lease or a permit.
Right, so sub D would be the one speaking to Senator Wilson's.
Right.
Yeah, page 86
Yeah.
is the one that.
it wouldn't take a lot of, another clause that gives,
Some discretion.
the discretion to negotiate,
And maybe,
has that in an extreme circumstance or some,
Absolutely.
yeah.
and maybe the commissioner wanted it so that then they could go back to the hotel and.
Oh, sure.
Like, oh, the legislature said I can't.
But that makes sense up till the point where we
Yeah,
pass it.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, when you're guaranteeing a lease agreement, you're negotiating and obviously, that's different than.
a lease
Overnight.
agreement
It gives you some
7 days a
predictability.
week, you know,
Okay.
so you're guaranteed.
Let's see if, so on page 86, line 14, we'll see what we can do, and making a note, and if we can put in some language that, you know, under extraordinary circumstances or something, you know, that can be approval granted by
Yeah.
the governor.
In
You like
person.
that? In person. Did you do that after that press release on the licenses, I think?
Or
You could offer them $75 a night and socks.
it's pretty simple.
No, because the legislature's taking them away.
No, stop.
No socks for you. You better get in fast, cause that deal is ending.
Wow, right?
Yeah. Okay, home delivered meals. I need to explore this further. I talked to someone from Viva and they were concerned about moving ahead on this because they're trying to get a larger waiver exception because of the rooms and meals, treatment for Medicaid reimbursement for other settings, and they, are, saying not that they're opposed to asking, but they would really like to do it as a combined, one single waiver, that addresses, because remember the rooms and meals as it relates to certain facilities got backed out, and it would, they're trying to see if they can get Medicaid coverage, and the plan is, as I understood it, was to do now. Maybe we could put in some other language that would give assurances around, you know, pursuing a waiver potential for room and board or nutrition programs, so it's more, more universal. But I did have lunch with Stephanie Barrett sometime, was it this week?
Yes.
Oh, and she was saying, that they would really like to, they want to do this. And because we really got hard hit on that room and board exclusion, for Medicaid.
And what about the rooms and meals tax? Do they have to pay a meals tax on these meals that they home deliver? Because that wouldn't be
No,
right.
no,
They're exempt. from
No, they're
all tax.
exempt. they're exempt. So, perhaps we could get some kind of more global language, because if we can get, approval for these, maybe.
I'll send her this one.
The following section
The word
is,
waterfall appears on page 90. Somebody didn't get the memo.
No, there's that.
I put it in quotes.
Yeah, right. I saw you try to get away with that with the quotation mark. And italics.
We're having some discussion, and this is all housing. In fact, I'm hoping that maybe that 5 million that's there on that contingent unobligated fund is something we can, actually move in, into the BAA. We've had some discussion on that today, and so that would, I think, be helpful to take it from, unobligated sort of a contingent to, and then we're getting into some more housing here.
And I would note that as part of the FY25, Governor recommended there's a section addressing unobligated ARPA funds in that recommended language.
Is it a line at all?
Not with the housing proposal.
They're actually reappropriating already, you see. Many of the funds.
What is the projected amount? Do we know the projected amount?
No,
What?
Doug Farnham came in and said they really won't have a good sense of that until the end of September.
That won't.
That money that we need to have a plan.
Okay.
And I must admit, I'm a little leery of appropriating potential. It seems like this is gonna be part of our 25 overall housing and setting priorities in terms of if there's money that can be freed up and devoted to housing. I'm not sure this is,
Why would
that this should be done in the BAA as opposed to the overall big bill.
Well, the flooding should, I think.
No, I'm talking about, to.
So I know
Middle,
the other pieces of.
I'm talking about all the different uses, like, 30 million to the HCB, to 25 million to
Right.
whatever. I
No.
think that should,
I agree, I'm just saying, the first thing, waterfall is the municipal, or the municipal,
no, that's the 5 million.
oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well,
Are you talking about?
I'm talking about, I'm gonna move the 5 million, out of, to actually appropriate, not a
I see.
contingent. I
I see.
believe, talking with administration folks, that we can actually move that 5 million
Yeah.
out of this section into the BAA.
Yeah.
Appropriate, that's all I'm saying. But all the other, in terms of how you would use any potential, redirected, unobligated, I think we should do it in the big bill, because, Keisha,
Because we may have different priorities.
Yeah.
Plus,
Right.
this isn't gonna have any money anyways by, the end of June, we aren't gonna know how much money it's gonna be.
no, but you still would have to articulate where your priorities are for anything that does become available once you know at the end of September. But my view is that we really should give our housing committees greater opportunity and not this, the argument is what does belongs in the BAA and really what requires a more robust discussion.
And we did, when we had tons of federal money, we did prime the pump in the BAA with big chunks of housing money. But I think at this point, you're right, it makes sense to put that up.
Yeah, so I'm a little. So people feel that we move the 5 million up, directly appropriate it, and then simply remove those sections that are in anticipation of money. Allow our housing people to, and then there's no urgency.
Right.
Cause you won't know what you got until into September. So I think it can go very readily.
I agree with that general thing. The only thing I want the baby hold is it $5 million? And that depends on the other section that we held earlier about the $10 million that the House wanted for municipal support of communities that had flood damage. So,
I'm taking the 5 million, moving it
I-
actually appropriate.
which is great. My only question is there might be an opportunity to have more of this ARPA money to do that.
Which we did.
So if the number is not set, I just want to have that continued discussion about how the communities that had all this flood damage, are we going to support them? At what level? Is this enough? Is there other opportunities? And I don't really know exactly what the Vermont Community Development Program is. Is that limited in some way? So it's going to support these municipalities through the flood damage, but I don't know if that prevents something that we would support. So I would just like to know a little bit more about
Now,
that program.
it gives them assurances, the 5 million is gonna be there between now and June 30th.
And then there's the opportunity.
And then we can put in like, when we do the big bill, I think what you're saying is, if we move this ahead, it shouldn't preclude the consideration
Well,
of
that
further
also
assistance.
If, and we haven't talked about this, do we have a desire to try to help these communities before they go through their tax setting, where they have to raise taxes because of the expenses that they've had?
Thought we already did that.
Is the BAA, does that make it more of an emergency need, that why you'd want to make sure you have the right amount in the BAA because they're trying to meet their needs that they have now from the floods? Does that make
Well,
sense?
Well, actually, we're giving them more than the House did
Yeah,
right now.
Right, well, the House gave them $10 million and $5 million.
Well, the 5 million.
Contingent, the 5 million is contingent.
Okay, well, they gave 10 million plus 5 million contingent.
Yeah, and I wanna give them
15.
10 and 5 right now.
Okay, well, I didn't know you said that we had decided about the 10.
Well, we've gotta
Oh,
figure out
We already
how,
passed the bill.
no, the
in
10
the
million.
BA. It's an earlier section that we
Yeah.
said.
we already
Oh.
did 10.
If what our challenge is and what we took for testimony, whatever that amount is,
Right.
how to assist those municipalities that got really hammered.
Understood. I was talking about the tax abatement.
We did that.
For education,
So there's that, there's 15 million according to.
10.
well, I didn't know there was 15 million. I thought the 10 million was set aside for a later discussion. So that's the only reason I.
If you did the $5 million the way the House did it, you might as well wait until next year's budget. Because
Because you wouldn't get it.
you wouldn't get
That
it.
is right.
They put the 10 million into
They put
the,
in the 10 million.
I've been assuming we were gonna do the 10 million, and maybe that was a bad assumption on my part, but yeah, it's hard for me to see how we don't do the 10 million, and I'm glad that the chair's suggestion to increase that by 5 million.
We're really doing 15,
Well,
and I'm all for 15.
well, yeah,
Johnson needs the
well,
money.
exactly, because we have all these communities.
Unless
I
you
wasn't
feel,
sure about that.
unless you feel you don't need it, and we can.
Well,
Can we get more from,
Somewhere else.
And just
I figured that
show
was
me.
also.
I want to go back to the 10. We had some discussion. We had Doug Farnham in. He had some ideas about how you could leverage it and pay interest, et cetera. And there was concern, obviously, that there's more of an immediate need than this loan. And Senator Westman was concerned, well, Johnson may not meet that grand list requirement and growth for the forgiveness of the loan. The question is, we just had grants and Representative Lanford basically said they didn't have a lot of time. And so what we're gonna have to do is how to strategically
Yeah.
use that, because I suspect some of it may be needed for municipalities for their grant, to match FEMA for their public losses. And but how we can give them something more immediate.
Yeah.
And then have the match, and so we might be able to do a mix and match with the 10. Even Diane was saying, well, maybe it isn't 10, maybe it's 8, but who knows? So we need to figure out what we do with the 10, how we define what the money is to be for, because you have to give administrative entities some parameters around
yeah,
money.
Right.
And then the 5 million will be moved up into the BAA and actually appropriated as opposed to contingent.
yeah, no,
Okay.
thank you.
So I've been assuming we were talking about the 10.
I was unclear on the 10. I thought that was questionable,
Well,
I don't,
which would have me worried.
Just,
no, I didn't
Yes.
think it was question, to me, our
But I
challenge
was
was.
questioning how to do it, because just said grants, which we need to.
So I was thinking more along the lines of how do we
Yeah.
flesh that out? And, depending on, we might meet the more immediate, like, I think the
Yeah.
figure was 4 million between Barry and Montpelier. But if we also don't have sufficient match to draw down all the FEMA dollars that the public damages have been.
If I don't got here 15, I still, in the whole overall process, I think he said, but something between 35 and 40 that we have to get to make all the match.
Right.
I wanna get as much as I can.
Yeah,
So, I've just given you 5 million more.
I'm shaking it and I'm running. I'm ready to say yes.
Ricky thinks the St. J, long coming is still running, he wants all train loans.
And I think we're all in agreement that we're not gonna prescribe the reallocation in the BAA of money that may or may not materialize in September. All right, so that will, the 5 million we've taken care of, we're gonna move that into contingent, and the balance is simply, we can have, I don't know, we can have some language about reallocation, but we're gonna get rid of that
the
appropriations.
waterfall.
Yeah.
Don't go chasing.
She doesn't.
I was like this. I made it.
yeah, that made it.
I know, and I just learned that quotes always go after the period, and
Absolutely.
Really?
Oh,
I
drives me
thought,
insane if it doesn't.
but it drives me insane.
If it does,
No, right, because like.
because it's kind of a lie. It's like saying that you're quoting the period when
Yeah.
you're not.
Right.
But stylistically, it just looks so horrible to have it elsewhere.
No, you
Really?
see, I would say, if you're using like a a term like,
Waterfall.
yeah, like waterfall, yeah. I do not believe in the term waterfall. I would put the waterfall in quotes in the period after,
Right, and
but I'm wrong, apparently.
according to MLA style, that would be wrong, but there is that, the sort of just theoretical question, when you quote something, you're saying, this is what this person said, right? And they didn't say a period, but you're putting it inside, but it's the understanding, it's just a
But you use
convention,
quotes for other than,
yeah.
quotes,
Yeah.
sometimes for terms
Yeah.
that are, uh-huh.
We have to work out the grammar.
Right.
I know, like, using I actually had, a grammar check because I used a possessive pronoun with a gerund. And you always use a possessive pronoun with a gerund. You know what a gerund is?
Sure.
Yeah, I bet you do. Verb
You
form
better.
and
Your body's
ing.
here.
Oh, my gosh.
Um,
So we're going
Writing.
through that. We're through the Vermont Strong.
right, so with the committee's
My favorite
permission, I
spot.
think the last couple of sections here, we can go through quickly. Section 98 on page 6, or 96, that's reporting requirements on FEMA funds. This is adapted from the language that was used, following tropical storm Irene. So this just ensures that the General Assembly.
Because we had already agreed with section 96.
Pretty much.
Sections 96, 97 are the most strong.
Yeah. Yeah, we closed those out.
Yeah.
Did everyone see the press release?
I never actually read it.
I don't know, I got.
Hannah might have a copy. Hannah will send you a copy.
Okay.
But the socks now, the legislature is gonna make you go barefoot. So,
I received 2 calls last night, why was the.
decisions today?
I got an email on that, yeah.
okay, so,
We just sort of muddy it.
where do you want us to go now, Grady?
Section 99, sub C is just, adding carry forward reporting language, and reversion reporting language. As part of the FY 25 BAA. And then the final section, will obviously change as sections are added or removed from the bill. Those are the effective dates.
Is that carry forward authority, they do that now, but we just
Yeah,
never
we
had
do it.
told them to do it or something?
We always do carry forward.
Why no, but do we actually have to add it to that?
I think we would give them the authority, don't we?
But this just says thou shalt provide us report. This is new language.
When somebody, 98, didn't people say this is exactly what we have to driving? FEMA public assistance,
Right, and then section 99,
it's standard.
with the addition of asking that there is a by appropriation report on carry forward and reversion. So rather than saying by AHS, Secretary's office, there's a reversion of X dollar amount. The House was concerned with the level of reversion you carry forward, and would like
You know what?
specificity.
Toward what end?
Right,
So, I mean, it's informational. Is it gonna,
it's like the 10G report.
it really is. Maybe we could say they should provide the house. What do people think about that option?
Yeah, make it clear, the House has to read these reports.
Well,
Because there's every single appropriation in the entire budget.
No, it's wherever you've done a reversion.
I mean, yeah, any appropriation, whether it's a reversion or a carry forward.
Correct.
It's huge. It's huge. And there's a lot of carry forward because bills come in after, I mean, contract.
some 80 centers.
I mean, we looked at that report, but did it really tell us anything? Well, maybe you got more out of it than I did.
No. No, I mean, I don't see any, but they could probably give it to us. It's like just in the accounting
They can
software. It's not
request it.
like they have to do a bunch of work. Like if we said, can you give us the carry forward for this appropriation, they could just do that.
But they actually will tell you. Well, they will tell you.
Right. If we wanted to know, we could add that, but they're asking for everything, is that necessary?
The House felt so.
I mean, Grady can answer that question.
I mean, but it's not great to just do enough about. the
I
account.
personally would like to get to the bottom of the 3-cent reversion that's in
Yeah.
this spell.
Yeah. I
Some
mean,
answers are needed on that.
Yeah, we want some accountability, don't we?
it's crazy
You
that.
have to give something, then, that's something we can talk about in
Yeah,
the,
let's take it out. They can ask for it.
Yeah,
I mean, they gave us, they can give us the report. So, let's just take it out, the general.
we heard from Tim that we're trying to lower the number of studies and reports.
Exactly.
We're just
All right.
following the pro Tim.
All right, oh, yes. All right.
blame it on-
And then I would like to flag for the committee, so yesterday, what we went through, were house changes to the bill, so there are likely some, governor recommended sections that the committee would still need to close out
Uh-huh.
or address, at another.
We got a whole lot of things to address.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I think Grady, you caught us at the end of the day, and we apologize for, pardon.
Really like,
Perhaps, our attention deficit disorders that you've experienced. I'm gonna suggest at this point, we adjourn the committee for today.